Brevity is the soul of wit, or so the saying goes, and while cinema is certainly packed with great, long movies, all but the most supremely confident of filmmakers are best advised to respect the audience's time as much as possible. After all, it's far more difficult to hate a short movie that flies by without making the audience truly feel its length, and sometimes directors are able to produce absolute cinematic gold on such a constrained canvas. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 awesome horror movies under 80 minutes. Number 10. Wreck. This 2007 found footage horror film, Wreck, remains one of the genre's finest efforts to date, a dizzying, frequently nerve-shredding Spanish horror in which a news reporter, Angela, ends up trapped inside an apartment complex with a group of firefighters whilst a viral infection spreads. At just 78 minutes in length, Wreck is the perfect example of a horror movie that gets to the point quickly and doesn't let up all the way to the finish line. There's not 1 ounce of fat on this thing, which is powered by both a fast, unspooling mystery and expertly executed suspense set pieces, culminating in one of the most gut-wrenching finales to any horror movie of the last 15 years. It is terror concentrated down to its most efficient form, and its direct sequel isn't actually that bad either. Now, you probably needn't bother with the English language remake Quarantine though, which is a basic shot-for-shot retelling, but 11 minutes longer and somehow less good. Number 9. Carnival of Souls. Cult classic 1962 horror Carnival of Souls, the sole feature film of director Herc Harvey, follows a young woman, Mary, whose life begins to unravel after surviving a car accident. Though its central narrative conceit might seem relatively obvious to modern eyes, Harvey's film is a masterclass of atmospheric design, especially for its era and its low $33,000 budget, and most obviously influenced George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead a few years later. Candace Hilagos is terrific as the put upon Mary, a woman becoming increasingly overpowered by haunting visions and, in particular, the allure of an abandoned carnival. Inside a drum-tight 78 minutes, Harvey crafts an intensely moody horror that remains a vaunted favourite amongst genre aficionados 6 whole decades later, and for damn good reason. Number 8. Host. The earlier stages of the pandemic were certainly a test of horror filmmakers' creativity, and budding director Rob Savage put himself on the map immediately with his expertly crafted computer screen film, Host. Shot over 12 weeks on Zoom during the early months of the pandemic, Host focuses on a group of friends who inadvertently rouse a demonic entity during a seance over Zoom. Clocking in at a ruthlessly efficient 56 minutes, Host is a perfect bite-sized genre exercise that, whilst being superficially familiar, so perfectly bottles the specificity of life under COVID. And yet the execution is thrillingly claustrophobic enough that it's a film likely to keep terrifying audiences long after the pandemic is an afterthought in most people's minds. Number 7. Bride of Frankenstein. Though James Whale's original 1931 Frankenstein would certainly fit the bill with its 70-minute runtime, he arguably outdid himself with his ludicrously entertaining 1935 sequel, Bride of Frankenstein. Even if you've never seen the film, you likely know the story through pop culture osmosis at this point. Per its title, a mate is created for Frankenstein's monster, albeit with a heart-rending outcome. The brilliance of this sequel is that rather than deign to syrupy sentimentality as its title might suggest, it only uses this potentially kooky setup to deliver an even more brutally devastating statement about the human or inhuman condition. For a film produced in the 1930s, it feels fascinatingly ahead of its time in questioning the utility of marriage while also riffing on more classical themes such as life, death, and loneliness. It crams a whole lot of movie into its mere 75-minute runtime and remains an all-timer sequel regardless of genre almost 90 years later as a result. Number 6. Tetsuo the Iron Man. You have never in your life seen a film quite like this utterly mesmerizing cyberpunk body horror that is known as Tetsuo the Iron Man. Low on budget and time but high on invention and scorched earth insanity, Tetsuo basically revolves around a businessman who is slowly transformed into a horrific chimera of man and metal. Less a captivating story than a surreal vision you simply can't look away from, this film has the most uniquely grotesque sights to show you, from off-putting sexual imagery to an especially creative effed-up fusion of human and machine. It's certainly not for everyone, but it's tough not at least to respect the balls-to-the-wall invention on offer throughout all of the 67 minutes of glorious monochrome madness. Number 5. The Amusement Park. George A. Romero's The Amusement Park was originally produced as an educational film about elder abuse and ageism, yet once Romero completed production, the financiers opted to shelve it due to Romero's edgier-than-expected approach. Gee, who could have seen that coming from the guy who gave the world Night of the Living Dead? The 54-minute film, shot over the course of just 3 days, was largely believed to be lost until a 16mm print was sent to Romero in 2017, shortly before his death. And last year, following an extensive 4K restoration process, the amusement park was finally released to the world at large on horror streamer Shudder. This is a genuinely disturbing, socially conscious horror about the perils of aging and society's upsetting disdain for the elderly. Lead actor Lincoln Mazel, who sadly passed away in 2009 at the age of 106 before the film was widely distributed, gives a masterful performance in the role of an aged man being stepped on by pretty much everyone around him. It may not be subtle, but it is genuinely visceral, and a welcome final gem of a film from one of the genre's undeniable masters. Number 4. Cat People. Val Lewton's Cat People remains one of the most distinctive and unforgettable horror films to emerge from the golden age of Hollywood, and truly the title is a totally accurate summation of what the movie is. A newly married woman, Irina, comes to believe that she's descended from an ancient tribe of people who turn into Black Panthers when sexually aroused. Despite the era of its production forcing director Jacques Tourneur to rely on implication and innuendo, this is nevertheless a deeply sensual, sexually charged piece of work for its period, using genre trimmings to tap into fear of intimacy and generational trauma. At just 73 minutes, it is paced like a whip and bleeds atmosphere from every single frame, courtesy of both the lead's seductive performance and Nicholas Musaraka's excellent cinematography. Number 3. Creep. Coming basically out of nowhere in 2014 was Creep, a found-footage horror starring director Patrick Brice as Aaron, a videographer who takes a gig working for a strange man named Joseph. Joseph's increasingly bizarre behavior leaves both Aaron and the audience unsure whether Joseph is merely a Hall of Fame weirdo or something much worse, and ensures that this 77-minute of a film is one of the most squirm-inducing, cringeworthy horrors of the last decade. Mark Duplass gives a terrific performance as the skin-crawlingly off-putting Joseph, in a film that toys cleverly with what audiences have come to expect from found-footage films. Despite the trickiness of its central conceit, Brice and Duplass were teamed for an arguably even better sequel, Creep 2, which landed dead on 80 minutes in length. As a terrifyingly awkward double bill, they're quite the impressive low-budget calling card for Brice, who is currently working with Duplass to figure out the plot for a potential third film, though by their own admission, it has not been easy. Number 2. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Robert Wiener's 1920 German expressionist masterpiece, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, has such a profound and continued impact upon cinema, and especially the horror genre, that it's basically impossible to list all the filmmakers who owe a debt to it. The story revolves around a deranged hypnotist who uses a somnambulist to commit murders in his name, but what truly still distinguishes this film over 100 years later is its mesmeric visual style. With its angular sets and innovative use of shadow, it's a film that's influenced everything from Nosferatu, that was released just 2 years later, to basically every film noir movie ever made. Even those without much patience for silent cinema should give 74 minutes of their life to this film, because this is such a visually rich meal of a film, and the one that still holds up so improbably well today. And number 1, Freaks. Todd Browning's 1932 horror Freaks is one of the genre's most iconic and infamous offerings. A film one can scarcely believe got made almost an entire century ago, considering the boldness of its subject matter and the empathy of its execution. Though the title might suggest Freaks to be a cheap stop-and-gawk experience, this is actually an at times shockingly powerful film about a group of circus performers who discover that a beautiful trapeze artist is attempting to seduce and murder one of their number for his inheritance. Now, this isn't to say that Browning always toes the line perfectly, and some may see Freaks as an exercise in exploitation no matter its compassionate through line, but on the balance of its material, it is absolutely a humanistic feat of cinematic representation far ahead of its time. At just 64 minutes, Freaks flies by like an absolute zip, yet even so many years later still harbours an elemental power to shock and surprise, particularly in a climax which would feel envelope-pushing today, yet alone the pre-Code era. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 awesome horror movies under 80 minutes. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Instagram, where it's @RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.